Hey guys, welcome to the fourth installment of the BSMD guide for students. This is where I take a deep dive into some of the things that I talked about in the prior video in terms of the general no nonsense guide for getting into a BSMD program. And the other videos are going to be in a playlist in terms of all of the things that I talk about for BSMD applications. So if you're interested in those, definitely check out the extracurricular guide as well as the standardized test guide as well as the overall no nonsense guide for getting into a BSMD program. Again, I always say this before every BSMD guide for students. I do not represent my school or employer, and the opinions are my own. So even if you find which program I'm going to Rutgers NJMS program, and I just wanted to say that these tips don't specifically apply for that program. If you're interested in that program, definitely feel free to reach out on social media and ask me about it. But I'm in no way talking about their admissions process, and I'm not involved in that. So I just wanted to let you guys know before we dive in. So BSMD programs have a part of the process, which is the interview day, just as medical schools have interviews. But the catch is that they have interviews both at the undergraduate institution and the medical school sometimes. And sometimes they just have it at the medical schools, and there are different processes and different types of interviews. So I wanted to get into that into this video. And if you're interested about learning more about my experiences, I do have a podcast about it that I did with my friend Varun. And I do have a few podcasts that I did with uh, my friend Yash, who goes to Northwestern HPME program. And he and I talked about interview day and how to prepare for interview day. So I'm taking some of our points during that conversation to make this video, but I think that interview and conversation talks a lot about what we experienced. So that's about 20 to 30 minutes of what we talked about. And I think there's two or three parts to that conversation, and I'll link them in the description below. So definitely check those out. So the first thing that I think about when I think about interview preparation is to talk about a general overview of why do an interview in the first place. The BSMD program is modeled after the traditional medical school interview where you come in and you talk about why you want to go into medicine. Again, you're not supposed to expected to know everything about the process, but I think in order to think about how you should conduct yourself during this interview, you should definitely have a script. And I don't say that in a way to make you sound like a robot when you're answering these questions, because it's not going to be the same questions that you're preparing, and the conversation may not flow in the same way. But you should definitely know what you're going to say before the person asks you. I'll give an example. If they ask you, why do you want to go into medicine? That's definitely an answer you should have prepared. If they ask you, what spirit animal do you have? Or like, what if you were an animal, what would you be? Those are the kind of questions that you're not probably prepared for, and I don't think you should think about going into this interview. There's a lot of uh, questions that come out of left field, and the those questions definitely have a jarring effect on many interviews. But if you have a script and you have your stories planned out, then I think you'll have a good idea of how to answer these questions. Speaking of, I think that every answer should be a story. It has a good beginning, middle, and end practice demarcated so you don't ramble on. Interview times, in terms of answer times, I think it's best to keep between 2 to 3 minutes. After you get 4 minutes and 5 minutes, it kind of rambles on, and some of these interviews are only 20 minutes, so you definitely want to keep them short. But definitely, if you've practiced them, it comes with time. And I think by the end of the interview trial, I was a lot better at managing my stories and talking about them in a manner that was very conducive to an interview format. And I was more charismatic. I think it all comes with practice. If charisma isn't your strong suit, definitely feel free to practice these stories a lot with someone who's trusted. Have a friend or a parent take you through these questions, and answer them honestly like you would with a admissions committee member. And the last thing that I want to say is if you're nervous that you don't belong here or you're in a group interview session, definitely know that you do belong there and that the interview is only a conversation at the end of the day. They just want to get to know you better. I think the interviewer is not there out of any sort of malice, and definitely understanding that they want you to succeed is the main thing when you're talking about any interview in general. Even if you're not successful with BSMD applications and you're talking about medical school interviews, everyone wants you to succeed. I think that looking at your application and making a judgment on paper is a very hard thing to do. So if you got the interview, that means that they want to know more about you as a person. And I think in order to let that shine, you have to understand the fact that you do belong there and you are validated in understanding the thought that you are going to be a BSMD student if admitted. I think that it's easy to understand that you should be there, but it's hard to act that out. So I just want to include that in the video as well. So when you do come to interview day, there's a lot of formats, and sometimes they have group interviews, sometimes they don't have group interviews. It all depends on the medical school themselves and what their mission statement is. For example, I know in the Albany program, they had us sit in a group and they made us talk about our achievement in front of other people, which I found really jarring in terms of it seemed like we were just bragging on top of each other. I don't know if they still do that. And again, it's not something to discourage you from applying to the Albany program. I think it's a great program, but I think that that's ultimately why I didn't like that program all that much because of that type of vibe that I was getting from the school, and also the tour. I didn't like it personally, but if you do like that school and you do like that format, then really judge for yourself where you perform. And again, everything is different. I know for another program, we were all gotten together to interview separately, but there was a colloquium at the beginning with a speaker, and it had everyone there. So I was really nervous about that because there were 90 plus students in the same room before we split to our respective rooms where we talked to the students and had our student interview. But I think that everything's going to be a new experience, so definitely make sure that you're prepared to see new things and do new things every time you go. It's not going to be all similar. So, in terms of dress, Western business attire, a suit and tie for men. For women, it's a little more ambiguous in terms of what you can wear, but I think that you can't go wrong with a slacks and a nice shirt. I think that those would be good for women. Also, uh, the goal of this dress is to act more mature than you are in terms of acting like a medical student because you're going to be there sooner than most. So I think that that's the main thing to think about. And you should have a sales pitch or an elevator pitch for yourself. And like I said, the most important question you need to answer is why medicine and why now that you're so young. Those two things are what interviewers are really looking for in terms of why should we admit you into a program that gets you here quicker than most, and what qualities do you have that make you uniquely suited for this position? Again, you have to cover all your bases with your intro and your questions, but you also have to cover your bases in terms of your technical knowledge. If you did any research at all in your high school career or you did any technical extracurricular, definitely have that down in terms of knowing about your CV and what you did in those activities. This is why I say acquire skills, not just activities, because when you talk about them, you want to talk about the skills that you did, you want to talk about the projects, and you want to talk about things that you're interested in. And the other 2 points that I had is stay on top of current studies and ethics books, because if you stay on top of these current studies in your expertise or your skill, or you read some ethics books, it can definitely pay dividends when they ask you about different topics that may throw other students off. For example, euthanasia is a big one, informed consent is a big one. Um, morality and the idea of justice in medicine. So all of these different ideas about what medicine is and what medicine is for the interviewer will coincide with what your answers that you have prepared say. And I think that those two things will really have a good conversation and a productive one for the interviewer to vouch for you during the session where they do make decisions about which students to admit and not. So one part of leaving a lasting impression on an interviewer, everyone says it's hackneyed, but a thank you, and definitely personalize it. The amount of times that I've seen students just send out a non-personalized thank you is a million times, I think. And I think that that's the big mistake when people say to thank your interviewer. And when you get their email or their card, definitely feel free to reach out to them and talk about things that you talked about during your interview, and that'll just cement in their mind that you are someone who cares about this program and you probably might attend this program if you are admitted. So it's the little things that count, and I think that if you do have a good rapport with your interviewer, definitely feel free to reach out to them and thank them for their time. And even if you don't, you should generally have a thank you email prepared so that you're not seeming like you don't care about the program or you don't want to attend this program. Just thank them for their time because they are taking time out of their clinical duties in their day to sit down with, let's face it, a high schooler and talk about life and talk about nothing. And a lot of people like that. I'm not saying they don't, but the fact remains that they still did it. So I think that it would be remiss if you didn't thank them for their time. If you're interested in anything at all regarding BSMD applications, definitely feel free to contact me at CS Medicine on Instagram and Twitter, and I can have more videos added to this BSMD program application season guide. I think that I'm also going to do one on personal statements in the future, so definitely feel free to stay tuned for that one. If you're interested in my podcast that I'm talking about, that I do with my friend Varun and other medical guests, definitely check it out at commonsensemd.com/episodes. Those include the most recent episodes that I've had with physicians and researchers about the topics that I'm interested in. So that concludes this video. If you're interested in more videos about the MCAT or about my life as a medical student, definitely feel free to subscribe to this channel. And that's it for this video. Remember, it's just common sense. Peace.